My name is Jesse. 3 days ago, I sat in a lawyer's office, reading a single piece of paper, and laughed so hard that the attorney put down his pen and asked if I needed a glass of water. My parents hadn't spoken to me in 2 years. No birthday cards, no texts. Then their lawyer sent me a one-page document. They needed my signature to sell my grandfather's mountain cabin, the only place in the world that ever felt like home. That document was supposed to take something from me. Instead, it handed me the one thing my family never gave me, proof that someone believed I was worth protecting. Before I tell you what was in that letter, let me take you back to the beginning, to the Thanksgiving dinner that ended everything. I grew up in a small town in the Rockies, where everyone knew each other's business. My father, Richard, was a well-respected real estate agent. He always dressed sharply in a suit and tie, and his handshake was firm. My mother, Elizabeth, was a volunteer at the local community center, organizing events and fundraisers. They looked like the perfect couple, the kind you'd see in a magazine. And then there was my little sister, Lily, 2 years younger than me. In my parents' eyes, Lily could do no wrong. Lily got writing lessons, while I was told I could try it next year. For her 15th birthday, Lily got a brand new horse, and I got a book about horses. Lily had the bigger bedroom because she needed space for her trophies. I shared a room with a storage closet and learned to sleep through the noise of a heater. My parents never hit me or screamed at me. They just treated me differently. My father had a phrase he used whenever I brought it up. He'd look at me with a condescending smile and say, "Lily is more delicate. You're the tough one, Jesse. That's what I like about you." I believed him for a long time. I wore tough like a badge. I worked part-time at the local diner through high school, paid for my own college application fees, and bought my own textbooks. It took me years to realize that in my father's vocabulary, tough meant low maintenance, she won't complain, and she's not worth the effort. I was the first in my family to go to college. I got a degree in business administration from the state university while working 20 hours a week at a local store. For years, no help, no co-signer on my student loans. Just me and an alarm clock set for 6 o'clock every morning. My parents said they'd come to my graduation. My mother picked out a fancy dress, and my father asked about parking. I reserved 4 seats, 2 for them, 1 for Lily, and 1 for my grandfather, Henry. He was the only one who never made me feel like an afterthought. On the morning of graduation, my phone rang at 7:30. "Sorry, Jesse," my father said. "Lily's horse is sick, and we need to take it to the vet." I stood in my dorm room, holding my cap and gown. I could hear my mother in the background asking Richard where the horse's medicine was. "It's just a ceremony," my mother called out. "You already have the degree, dear." I walked across that stage alone, sat in a row of strangers' families, and took my own photo using the timer on my phone propped against a chair. That afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Grandpa Henry. "I'm so proud of you, Jesse," he said. His voice was rough, like he was holding back tears. "Don't worry, I've taken care of things." I didn't know what he meant. I thought he was talking about a graduation gift. I wouldn't understand what he meant for another 7 years. I met Tom when I was 25. He was a mechanic, working at a local auto repair shop. I heard him before I saw him, singing along to classic rock while he fixed a car. Off key, but full of energy. Tom was hard, working, with calloused hands and a kind smile. He brought me a bouquet of wildflowers he picked on the way to our first date. We got married when I was 27. It was a small ceremony at the courthouse. Grandpa Henry had passed away 3 years earlier, and I still felt the void he left every time something good happened, and I couldn't share it with him. My parents came to the wedding, but only stayed for a short time. At a family dinner the following week, my father sat at the head of the table, looked at Tom across the turkey, and said, "I thought you'd aim higher, Jesse." "A mechanic? That's a step down." My mother pursed her lips, and Lily scrolled through her phone. Tom didn't flinch. On the drive home, he said, "I don't need your dad to respect my job, but I need him to respect you." I wanted to cut off contact right then. But Grandpa Henry had only been gone 3 years, and I held on to the hope that he'd want me to keep trying, to be the tough one. So I stayed. Then came Thanksgiving. There were about 20 people in my parents' living room. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the kind of crowd where someone's always refilling the drinks and no one notices when the music changes. Lily pulled me aside in the kitchen. She needed $8,000. It was the fourth time she'd asked. The previous loans were still unpaid. She said it was for a new saddle and riding equipment. I said no, firmly and clearly. She walked back into the living room with tears in her eyes. My father stood up from his chair like a bolt of lightning. "What kind of sister refuses to help her own family?" he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Aunt Sarah stopped pouring the wine, and Cousin Jake looked at me in shock. "You've changed, Jessie," Richard said. "And not for the better." Then my mother leaned over to Aunt Margaret and said, just loud enough, "She's been like this since she married that man. I think she needs to see a therapist." The room went silent. 20 people, not a single word. Aunt Sarah looked at the floor, and Uncle Bob coughed. Jake stared at me, like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. I felt invisible, surrounded by people, but completely alone. I put on my coat, kissed Cousin Jake's baby on the forehead, and walked out the door. Tom was already in the car, waiting for me, with a determined look on his face. The next 2 years were filled with silence. No phone calls, no family gatherings. My parents spread a story that I was mentally unstable and that Tom was isolating me from the family. One by one, the relatives stopped calling. By spring, the only person from my old life who still reached out was Cousin Jake. Tom and I moved to a town 50 minutes away. I got promoted to a management position at a large company that knew nothing about my family. Tom opened his own auto repair shop and hired a couple of mechanics. We bought a small house with a backyard and a porch that caught the morning sun. It was a quiet life, a good life. But every Thanksgiving, I'd find myself looking at my phone, scrolling through old contacts, hovering over names I couldn't bring myself to delete. Tom never pressured me. He'd sit with me on the couch, holding my hand, and just be there. One night, I asked him, "Do you think I made a mistake?" He didn't hesitate. "You'll know when it's right. And if it never is, that's okay, too." I drove by the mountain cabin once. The paint on the cabin was peeling, and the porch was starting to sag. I slowed down but didn't stop. It hurt too much. The cabin was full of memories of Grandpa Henry, the smell of pine, the sound of the crackling fire, and the way he'd always have hot chocolate waiting for me when I visited. 2 years passed. Then one Tuesday in April, an envelope arrived. It had a law firm's return address I'd never seen before, and it was addressed specifically to me. That envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I opened it. 2 years of silence, and then a letter from a lawyer. I knew that sinking feeling in my stomach all too well. I opened it on a Thursday morning while Tom was at work. The coffee was still hot, and the house was quiet. The letter was from a Mr. Thompson, an attorney in my parents' town. It stated that Richard was initiating the sale of the mountain cabin at 23 Pine Ridge Road, Grandpa Henry's place. And as a potential heir to Henry's estate, I was being asked to sign a quitclaim deed waiving any claim to the property. I read it 3 times. 2 years of no contact, and the first time my family reaches out, it's through a lawyer, asking me to give up the last thing Grandpa Henry left me. I set the letter down and looked at the small wooden box on the bookshelf. It was Grandpa Henry's toolbox, made of oak, with his initials carved on the lid. It still smelled like sawdust and oil. Inside the box, tucked at the bottom, was a sealed envelope I'd kept for 7 years. I'd found it when I was cleaning out his things after the funeral. Yellowed paper, sealed with tape, and his handwriting on the front. "For Jessie, when you need it." I'd never opened it. I thought it was a goodbye letter, something sentimental that would make me cry. That night, for the first time in 7 years, I opened Grandpa Henry's envelope. My hands were steady until I tore the seal. Inside were 2 things. The first was a legal document, heavy paper, stamped and notarized. The heading read, "Irrevocable Trust Deed, Henry J. Family Trust." Below it, in clear type, the property at 23 Pine Ridge Road, the mountain cabin, was held in irrevocable trust. The trustee was a Mr. Harris, Grandpa Henry's personal attorney. The sole beneficiary was listed on page 3, Jesse Murray. The second item was a single sheet of notebook paper, folded twice. His handwriting, slanted and strong, read, "Jesse, I know your father. He means well, but he doesn't see you for who you are. This cabin is yours. It's always been yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Grandpa H." I sat on the floor, my back against the couch, and cried. It wasn't a breakdown, it was a healing. He knew. Before I ever walked out of that Thanksgiving dinner, before I ever met Tom, before I ever stopped answering my father's calls, Grandpa Henry saw it all. And he didn't just feel sorry for me. He did something about it. Tom came home that night and found me sitting there, papers spread out around me. He sat down beside me, put his arm around me, and didn't say a word. The next morning, I called Mr. Harris. He answered on the second ring. "The trust is valid," he said. "It's never been challenged, and your father's name doesn't appear anywhere in the documents." I called Mr. Thompson's office that afternoon. The receptionist had that tone of voice that made it clear she'd already made up her mind about me. "Are you calling to return the signed document, Ms. Jesse?" "I'd like to come in," I said. "I have some questions about the document before I sign." After a pause and the sound of a keyboard clicking, she said, "Mr. Thompson is available Friday at 11 o'clock. Friday works." I hung up and called Mr. Harris back. I asked him to prepare certified copies of the trust deed, the original filing, the county stamp, the beneficiary schedule, everything. "I'll have it ready by Thursday," he said. Then, carefully, "Ms. Jesse, do you want me to be present at the meeting?" "No, but I'd like you available by phone." "Understood." The next 5 days, I prepared. I organized the documents, double-checked the facts, and made sure everything was in order. I read the trust deed 3 times from front to back. I pulled the county clerk's filing records online to confirm the transfer date. I compared it against the probate records from Grandpa Henry's estate, and it all matched what Mr. Harris had told me. The mountain cabin was transferred into the trust before Henry died. It never passed through probate. Richard just assumed he'd inherit it. And no one ever told him otherwise because the only person who knew was Grandpa Henry. Tom asked me on Thursday night if I wanted him to come with me. I shook my head. "This one's mine." He kissed my forehead and handed me a thermos of coffee for the drive. The night before the meeting, Jake called. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Your dad's been calling everyone. He's really stressed, Jesse." "About the cabin?" "About Lily's writing business. It's in serious trouble. She took out business loans and your dad signed all of them." I sat on the porch and let that sink in. The crickets were loud, and Tom was inside doing the dishes. Jake continued, 6 months ago, your dad refinanced the mortgage on their house and put the money into Lily's business. Now the business is failing, the loans are due, and your dad owes the bank about $200,000. My father, the real estate agent, the responsible one, had gambled his retirement and his home on Lily's writing business. He found a buyer for the cabin, Jake said, for $400,000. Enough to cover the debt and keep the business going for a while. And the only thing standing in his way is your signature. He told everyone you'd sign. He said, "Jesse has no use for that cabin anyway." I stared at the trees in the backyard. The same skies stretched over Pine Ridge Road. "Thank you for telling me, Jake. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to that meeting." Friday came. I put Grandpa Henry's toolbox on the passenger seat. I tucked the folder of trust documents into my bag and drove 50 minutes back to the town I'd left behind. The drive was like muscle memory. I didn't need GPS. My hands knew the turns before my brain registered the road signs. I passed the gas station where Grandpa Henry used to fill up his truck, the school where I used to play basketball, and the park where we used to have picnics. I slowed down at the stoplight near Mr. Thompson's office. I looked at the folder on the passenger seat, certified copies, county stamps, trust deed, Mr. Harris's business card. I thought about the last time I'd asked my father about Grandpa Henry's estate. It was at the funeral reception, 3 days after they buried him. I was 22, red-eyed, holding a plate of food I couldn't eat. "Did Grandpa leave a will?" I'd asked. Richard had barely looked up from his conversation. He didn't have much. The cabin comes to me as next of kin. That's how it works. He said it like he was always right, without ever checking. He never hired a lawyer, never searched the county records, never considered that his own father might have had a different plan. The light turned green. I pressed the gas. I wasn't going back to fight. I was going back to finish what Grandpa Henry started. Mr. Thompson's office was on the third floor of a brick building downtown, above a coffee shop. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with glasses on a chain, looked me up and down when I gave my name. Have a seat, Ms. Jessie. Mr. Thompson will be with you shortly. There was something in her tone, not exactly rude, but more like she'd already decided I was the bad guy. I sat in a chair next to a dying plant, opened my bag, and checked the folder one more time. Trust deed, certified copy, county filing receipt, Mr. Harris's card with his direct number circled in pen, Grandpa Henry's handwritten letter sealed in a clear sleeve. Everything was in place. I closed the folder and rested my hands on top of it. My heart was steady, and my breathing was even. I'd spent 2 years being called unstable by people who couldn't manage a writing business. I could handle a conference room. The clock on the wall ticked past 10:58. A phone rang somewhere in the back. I heard a door open. Ms. Jessie. Mr. Thompson's voice was smooth and confident. He was in his late 50s, with gray hair at the temples. He stepped aside and gestured toward the conference room. I stood up, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked through the door. And there, sitting at the far end of the table, in a pressed suit with his hands folded in front of him, was my father. Richard looked up when I walked in. The same strong jaw, the same confident posture. "Hello, Jessie," he said, his voice calm and controlled. "Let's get this over with quickly. I know you're busy." "I am," I said. "Look," he said, tilting his head slightly. "I know things have been difficult, but this isn't about us. This is about the cabin. Your grandfather would have wanted this." He used Grandpa Henry's name. He sat across from me in a lawyer's conference room, the first time we'd been in the same room in 2 years, and he used the name of the one person who'd always stood up for me to try to manipulate me. My fingers rested on the edge of my folder. I knew then that this would only end if I took control. Richard continued, "The cabin has been sitting empty for years. No one's using it. I've got a buyer ready to pay $400,000. Lily's business needs this money to stay afloat." Mr. Thompson slid a document across the table. I looked down at it. Quitclaim deed, in bold at the top, a signature line at the bottom with my name typed beneath it. I picked it up and read it carefully, every word, every clause. The room was quiet except for my father tapping his finger on the table. I set the document down. "You haven't asked me how I am." Richard blinked. "What?" "2 years of no contact, and the first time you reach